She still remembered the smell of burnt coffee that morning. It clung to the air like a bad omen, mixing with the sharp winter cold seeping through the cracked kitchen window. Sarah Miller stood motionless, her hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale. Outside, the city of Chicago was waking up, unaware that her world had already ended. Her son was late. Ethan was never late. At 17, he had that rare kind of discipline that came from growing up too fast. He woke up before his alarm, made his own breakfast, kissed her on the cheek every morning before school. "Love you, Mom," he always said. Always. That day, the silence was louder than any scream. Sarah checked her phone again. No new messages, no missed calls. The screen reflected her tired face, dark circles under her eyes, lines that hadn't been there a year ago. Life had never been kind to her, but she had learned how to endure. Single mother. Night shifts at a private nursing facility. No family to lean on. Ethan was her anchor, her reason. She grabbed her coat and keys and rushed out. The school parking lot was chaos. Police cars, yellow tape. A crowd of students whispering, crying, filming. Her heart began to pound so hard she thought it might break her ribs from the inside. She ran toward the entrance, ignoring the officer who tried to stop her. "My son!" she gasped. "Ethan Miller! Where is my son?" The officer's eyes softened in a way she would never forget. That look alone told her everything, before his mouth even opened. "I'm sorry, Mom." The words after that blurred together. Fight, locker room, ambulance. Critical condition. Hospital corridors smelled like antiseptic and despair. Machines beeped rhythmically, mocking her with their calm. She saw Ethan through the glass before she was allowed inside. Tubes everywhere, bruises on his face, blood dried near his hairline. She collapsed beside him, holding his hand, whispering his name again and again as if love alone could pull him back. A doctor approached later, middle-aged, tired eyes. "He suffered severe head trauma," he said gently. "We did everything we could." Everything. That word haunted her. Ethan died at 2:17 p.m. Just like that, 17 years of sacrifice, love and struggle were reduced to a flat line on a monitor. Sarah didn't scream. She didn't cry. Not at first. Something inside her went silent. The police called it an unfortunate altercation. 3 boys, privileged, wealthy families. 1 punch too many. A fall, an accident. Accident. The main name in the report was Jason Cole, son of Richard Cole, real estate tycoon, political donor, a man whose name opened doors and closed mouths. The other 2 boys were quickly labeled as present but not directly responsible. Within a week, the story vanished from the news. Within 2 weeks, the charges were reduced. Within a month, Jason Cole was back in school. Sarah attended every court hearing alone. She watched expensive lawyers twist words until truth looked like fiction. She listened as Ethan's name was spoken, like a minor inconvenience. "Good kid," one lawyer said casually, "but kids fight." Fight? She wanted to stand up and tear the courtroom apart with her bare hands. The judge's verdict was short and devastating. Probation, community service, case closed, no jail, no real punishment. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded the Cole family. Cameras flashed. Jason wore a pressed suit, his hair perfectly styled, his face calm, not a trace of guilt. Sarah stood across the street, invisible. That night, she sat alone in Ethan's room. Everything was untouched. His hoodie still hung on the chair. His bed was neatly made. His scent, soap and laundry detergent, lingered like a cruel memory. She picked up his phone. Hundreds of messages, school jokes, homework reminders, and then videos. Her hands trembled as she watched. A locker room. Laughter. Ethan cornered. Jason's voice clear and cruel. "Say it again," Jason mocked. A shove. Another. Ethan tried to walk away, then the punch, then cheering, her breath stopped. This wasn't a fight. This was murder. Something inside her finally broke, but not into tears, into resolve. Sarah Miller buried her son on a rainy Thursday. Only 5 people attended. No Cole, no apology, no justice. After the funeral, she didn't go home. She went to work. That night, while changing a patient's IV, she overheard 2 nurses talking about a charity gala. High-profile donors, politicians, elite families. Richard Cole was on the list. That was the first spark. Over the following weeks, Sarah changed. She spoke less, slept less, observed more. She started reading law, psychology, corporate scandals. She learned how power worked, how money buried truth. She sold her car, she quit her job. She moved into a smaller apartment no one cared to notice, and she started planning. Revenge didn't come to her as rage anymore. It came as clarity. She didn't want Jason dead. Death would be mercy. She wanted him to live long enough to understand loss, to feel helpless, to beg. One evening, she stood in front of the mirror, looking at her reflection. The grieving mother was still there, but behind her eyes, something sharper had taken shape. "For you, Ethan," she whispered. Outside, the city lights flickered, unaware that a storm had been born quietly in the heart of a woman everyone had underestimated. And this time, justice would not be polite. Sarah learned very quickly that grief had stages, but revenge had layers. The first layer was patience. She spent days walking the city like a ghost, watching people who had everything she'd lost and more. Downtown cafes where men in suits laughed too loudly. Private gyms behind tinted glass. Gated townhouses that looked like fortresses pretending to be homes. She watched Richard Cole's world from the outside, studying patterns the way predators studied prey. The Cole family lived in a lakefront mansion in Lincoln Park. Tall iron gates, security cameras that rotated slowly, lazily, as if even they were bored of guarding privilege. 2 SUVs in the driveway almost every night. A housekeeper who arrived at 7 and left at 4. A private driver. No visible security guards. But she knew better. Men like Richard Cole didn't need visible muscle. They owned influence. Sarah sat across the street on a park bench for hours some days, pretending to read, pretending to scroll on her phone. In reality, she memorized everything. Shift changes, deliveries, garbage pickup times. When the lights went out upstairs. When Jason came home drunk and loud with friends. When he left early mornings for community service, a smirk on his face like it was all one big joke. Jason Cole slept well. That infuriated her more than anything. At night, she returned to her apartment and wrote everything down. Not in a notebook. Too risky. She used an old laptop she'd bought with cash from a pawn shop. No Wi-Fi. No accounts. Just documents saved under meaningless names. She also began another task, one that made her hands shake the first few times. She practiced becoming someone else. Sarah Miller, grieving single mother, was invisible. That was her weakness. So she built a new version of herself, one the world would notice. She dyed her hair a soft chestnut brown, styled it differently. She replaced her worn clothes with tailored but modest outfits from thrift stores in wealthy neighborhoods. Nothing flashy, just enough to look like she belonged near money. She practiced smiling in the mirror, practiced speaking with calm confidence, practiced listening more than talking. At 42, she learned what no one had taught her before: how to be underestimated on purpose. Her entry point came unexpectedly. A flyer taped near a bus stop advertised a Cole Foundation youth outreach program: scholarships, mentorship, community rebuilding. Richard Cole's name printed proudly at the top. Sarah stared at it for a long time. The irony almost made her laugh. She attended the open volunteer orientation a week later. The room was filled with eager faces: college students, retirees, social climbers. A young coordinator welcomed everyone with rehearsed enthusiasm. "We're so happy to have people like you," the woman said. "The Cole Foundation believes in second chances." Second chances. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. She filled out the forms carefully. Background checks, references. She had nothing to hide. Her life was clean, painfully so. When asked why she wanted to volunteer, she paused just long enough to seem thoughtful. "My son passed away last year," she said softly. "Helping young people feels meaningful." The truth, wrapped just enough to pass. The coordinator's eyes softened. Sympathy was a currency Sarah was learning to spend. She was accepted within days. The foundation office was located in a glass building downtown, bright, modern, soulless. Sarah took an administrative support role: phones, files, scheduling. Nothing glamorous, perfect. From there, she watched everything. She learned how donations moved, how scholarships were awarded, how names were selected for publicity, how Richard Cole's image was polished daily by teams of people paid to lie beautifully. Jason's name came up often, but never in connection with Ethan. Jason was listed as a youth ambassador, a reformed young man, a role model. Sarah's hands trembled the first time she saw his profile picture on the internal system. Same smug smile, same careless eyes. She excused herself to the bathroom and vomited. Then she washed her face, reapplied lipstick, and went back to work. Patience. Weeks passed. Sarah became reliable, quiet, trusted. She stayed late, took extra tasks, learned software systems no one bothered to explain. She became useful. And usefulness opened doors. One evening, while organizing digital archives, she found something interesting: expense discrepancies. Small ones at first, travel reimbursements that didn't align, vendor payments with vague descriptions. Nothing illegal on the surface, but enough to make an auditor curious. She copied nothing, yet. She kept watching. At the same time, she began another operation, closer to Jason. Jason frequented a high-end gym in River North, private trainers, expensive memberships. Sarah joined using money she barely had left, telling herself this was an investment. She timed her visits carefully. She didn't approach him at first. She let him notice her. Passing glances, polite smiles, familiarity without intent. Jason was exactly what she expected: loud, arrogant, bored. A young man who had never faced consequences and believed he never would. One afternoon, she accidentally dropped her water bottle near the weights he was using. "Sorry," she said quickly. "No problem," Jason replied, flashing that smile. "You're new here, right?" "Yes," she said, still figuring things out. He offered to help. Of course he did. They talked casually. She learned his routine, his frustrations, his shallow ambitions. He complained about his probation like it was an inconvenience, not a punishment. "They blew it way out of proportion," he said one day, rolling his eyes. One stupid fight, and suddenly I'm the villain. Sarah kept her face neutral. Must have been hard, she said gently. He shrugged. People are too sensitive. That night she went home and cried for the first time since Ethan's funeral. But the tears didn't stop her. They sharpened her. Slowly she became part of Jason's orbit. Not a friend, not a threat, just present. He flirted, she deflected, but not completely. Enough to keep him engaged, enough to make him careless. Carelessness was her goal. Months passed, spring turned to summer. Sarah gathered fragments of Jason's life, his drinking, his reckless driving, his private parties. She heard him brag about getting out of situations because of his father. "No one can touch me," he laughed once. She smiled politely. Inside, she memorized the words. At the foundation, the discrepancies grew. She noticed patterns now, shell vendors, inflated invoices, funds redirected to consulting services that led nowhere. Richard Cole wasn't just protecting his son, he was dirty. One late evening, while most of the office was empty, Sarah sat alone at her desk, staring at the screen. Her cursor hovered over a folder labeled Archived Internal. She knew crossing this line meant there was no going back. She opened it. Inside were emails. Old ones, conversations between Richard Cole and his legal team, crisis managers, fixers. And then she saw Ethan's name, her breath caught. The emails discussed containment, narrative control, minimizing exposure. Kate, one message referenced a payment made to a school administrator. Another mentioned pressure on witnesses. Her hands shook violently now. They had buried her son's truth deliberately. This wasn't negligence. This was a system. She copied everything onto a hidden drive she carried taped inside her purse lining. She wiped her tracks carefully, heart hammering with every second. When she left the building that night, the city felt different, closer, louder, as if it knew. At home, she sat on the floor and held Ethan's hoodie against her face, breathing him in. "I'm close," she whispered. "I promise." But revenge had another layer she hadn't fully prepared for. Fear. 2 days later, an unmarked car followed her for 3 blocks before turning away. At the gym, Jason asked casually, "You ever feel like people watch you?" She forced a laugh. "Paranoid much?" But inside, alarm screamed. Richard Cole was no fool. And Sarah Miller was no longer invisible. The storm she had started was beginning to move. And once it did, it wouldn't stop gently. Fear didn't arrive loudly. It slipped into Sarah's life the way winter crept into Chicago. Quiet at first, almost polite, then suddenly everywhere. She changed her routines without making it obvious. Different bus routes, different gym hours. She stopped sitting on the same park bench across from the Cole house. She learned which reflections in shop windows belonged to her and which did not. The unmarked car didn't follow her again, but that didn't mean anything. Men like Richard Cole didn't waste resources on intimidation unless they were certain someone was worth intimidating. That realization steadied her. If they were watching, it meant she mattered. At the foundation, she acted exactly the same. Same soft voice, same efficiency, same willingness to help. She never rushed, never hesitated. People trusted consistency, but inside she was building a map. She learned that Richard Cole trusted very few people directly. His attorney, Mark Ellison, was one. His personal assistant, Diane Keller, was another. Diane was meticulous, overworked, and quietly resentful. An emotional crack Sarah noticed immediately. Sarah made Diane's life easier. Coffee before meetings, clean schedules, gentle reminders framed as concern. "You shouldn't have to carry all this alone," Sarah once said casually. Diane smiled, tired and grateful. "You have no idea." Cracks widened when pressure was applied gently. Meanwhile, Jason grew sloppier. Probation had officially ended, and with it, whatever thin leash he pretended to respect. He partied harder, drank more, boasted louder. He complained endlessly about his father's expectations, while enjoying every benefit of his protection. One night, after too many drinks at a private rooftop party, he leaned too close to Sarah. "You're different," he said, eyes glassy. "Most people want something from me." She held his gaze calmly. "Maybe I already have what I want." That intrigued him. She let him believe whatever he needed to, but she never crossed the line. Desire was a tool, not a destination. The real shift came through someone Sarah hadn't anticipated. Lena Rodriguez was a junior accountant at the foundation. Quiet, brilliant, overlooked. Sarah noticed her because she noticed everything. One afternoon, Lena approached Sarah's desk, eyes darting around. "Can I talk to you?" she asked softly. They met in the break room. Lena's hands trembled as she held her mug. "I think something's wrong," she whispered. Sarah said nothing. Silence invited truth. "There are accounts I don't understand," Lena continued. "Transfers that don't match donor intent. I asked my supervisor and he told me to stop digging." Sarah's pulse quickened, but her face remained calm. "That must be stressful," she said. Lena laughed bitterly. "I'm not stupid. I know what this looks like. But I have student loans, a family. I can't afford to be a whistleblower." Sarah met her eyes. "You shouldn't have to choose between integrity and survival." The words weren't a promise, but they sounded like one. From that day on, Lena shared carefully. Nothing directly incriminating at first. Patterns, irregularities. Enough to confirm what Sarah already knew. Together, without saying it out loud, they were assembling a weapon. Sarah began backing up everything in layers, encrypted drives hidden in mundane places, a copy taped under a drawer, another sealed inside a bag of rice. Redundancy was survival. But revenge wasn't just about exposure, it was about consequence. She needed Jason to fall publicly, personally, irreversibly. The opportunity came through his ego. Jason had been secretly working on a startup idea, some half-baked tech platform his father's connections would eventually fund. He talked about it constantly, especially when drunk. "I'm gonna be bigger than my dad," he bragged. "People will forget all that old crap." Sarah listened. Then she fed him encouragement. "You should pitch it," she said one evening. "There are private investor events all the time." He scoffed. "You don't just get invited." She smiled. "Not officially." Through the foundation, Sarah had access to donor mixers and private charity galas, where deals happened quietly over champagne. She suggested his presence casually to an events coordinator she'd grown friendly with. "He's passionate about youth entrepreneurship," she said. "Might be inspiring." Jason was added to the guest list without much thought. That night, Sarah wore a simple black dress. Nothing memorable. Jason wore confidence like armor. He drank, he pitched, he exaggerated, and he talked too much. Sarah watched from a distance as he cornered a middle-aged investor and laughed loudly about getting away with things. She recorded nothing herself. She didn't need to. People like Jason believed rooms were always on their side. Phones were everywhere. The next morning, a short video began circulating privately among certain circles. Not viral, not yet. just enough to raise eyebrows. Richard Cole noticed. That same week, Diane Keller asked Sarah to stay late. "Mr. Cole wants tighter control," Diane said quietly. "He's concerned." "About what?" Sarah asked gently. Diane hesitated. "Leaks." There it was. Security protocols changed, file access restricted, passwords updated. Sarah's access narrowed, but not before she'd already taken what she needed. Then came the first direct warning. Sarah returned home one evening to find her apartment door unlocked. Nothing was missing. But her laptop was open. On the screen was a single document, blank, except for one line typed in the center. "You should let go." Her breath caught. This wasn't random. This was deliberate restraint. A message from people who believed fear was enough. Sarah closed the laptop calmly, locked the door, and sat on the floor in the dark. For the first time, she considered stopping. Not because she was afraid of them, but because she was afraid of what came next. She imagined Ethan's laugh, his patience, the way he always defended others, even when it cost him. And she remembered the locker room video. She stood up. "No," she said aloud. The next phase required precision. She contacted a journalist anonymously, one known for patience and integrity rather than speed. She didn't give everything, just a taste, just enough to provoke curiosity. At the same time, she prepared a personal blow. Jason had a weakness he didn't know she knew, a girl named Emily Turner, college sophomore. On-again, off-again relationship. Jason treated her like a convenience. She idolized him anyway. Sarah met Emily by chance at a cafe near campus. They talked about life, about toxic relationships, about how powerful families controlled narratives. Sarah never mentioned Ethan. She didn't need to. Emily's doubts surfaced naturally. Weeks later, Emily found old messages on Jason's phone. Jokes about Ethan, laughing emojis, casual cruelty. She broke down, and she talked. Emily didn't go to the police. She went to the journalist. When the first article dropped, it didn't accuse. It questioned. Was justice influenced by power? Names weren't front and center. But Ethan's story was finally told. Public response was slow at first. Then it caught fire. Richard Cole released a statement calling the piece irresponsible. Jason deactivated his social media. Sarah watched the news from her small apartment, heart steady. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of collapse. But the most dangerous moment was coming. Because when powerful men start losing control, they stop pretending to be civilized. And Sarah knew, deep down, that they would come for her next. The second article hit harder than the first. This time it named names. Not boldly on the front page, not screaming accusations, but quietly, precisely, the way truth often did the most damage. It laid out timelines. It compared witness statements to court outcomes. It asked why security footage from the locker room had disappeared. It questioned how a 17-year-old boy's death had resulted in nothing more than probation. And in the middle of it all was a photograph. Ethan Miller, smiling, alive, human. Sarah stared at the image for a long time, her fingers pressed against the screen. It was the first time the world had seen him as more than a footnote. The reaction was immediate. Social media erupted. Old classmates came forward. One anonymous student confirmed the locker room culture. Another admitted they'd been pressured to stay silent. The word accident began to crumble under the weight of memory. Richard Cole cancelled 2 public appearances in one day. Jason disappeared completely, and Sarah felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Not satisfaction, momentum. But momentum attracted danger. 3 nights after the article, Sarah's phone rang at 2:11 a.m. Unknown number. She let it ring. It rang again. Then a text appeared. "We can make this stop. For everyone's sake." She deleted it. The next morning, Diane Keller didn't come into work. Neither did Lena. The foundation sent a vague internal email about temporary restructuring. Security guards stood at the entrances now. Access badges were scanned twice. Conversations stopped when Sarah walked by. She had become a variable. That afternoon, Mark Ellison, the lawyer, asked to see her. His office smelled like leather and arrogance. He gestured for her to sit, smiling thinly. "You've been very helpful to the foundation," he said. "Mr. Cole appreciates loyalty." Sarah folded her hands calmly. "I just do my job." Ellison nodded. "Of course, but difficult times call for clarity." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a severance package. Generous, silent. "No need to drag this out," he said. "You've been through enough." She looked at him steadily. "Is this about my son?" Ellison's smile faltered for half a second. "Just enough. It's about moving forward," he said. Sarah closed the folder. "I already am," she replied. She stood and walked out before he could stop her. That evening she packed essentials into a single bag. Documents, drives, cash, Ethan's hoodie. She left the apartment an hour later, locking the door behind her with no intention of returning. The journalist, Tom Harris, met her in a quiet diner outside the city. He looked older than on television, tired in a way that came from caring too much. "They're circling," he said, without preamble. "You know that, right?" "Yes." "They'll discredit you, dig into your past, frame you as unstable." She nodded. "I expected that." Tom studied her. "Why are you doing this?" "For my son," she said. "And because if this goes away again, it will happen to someone else." He exhaled slowly. "Then we need to go all the way." She handed him the drives. "Everything," she said. Tom's expression hardened as he scanned the files. "This isn't just a scandal," he murmured. "This is a criminal enterprise." "Then treat it like one." The third article dropped with receipts, emails, transfers, names of shell companies, a clear line from donor money to private accounts, pressure tactics, payoffs. And buried within it all, proof that witnesses in Ethan's case had been silenced. The response was explosive. Federal investigators announced a preliminary inquiry. Donors froze accounts. Board members resigned overnight. Richard Cole's public image fractured. Jason was spotted leaving the country. Too late. An arrest warrant was issued 3 days later for obstruction of justice, not murder, not yet. Sarah watched the press conference from a motel room 2 towns away. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the magnitude of it all. She had done this, but victory was incomplete. Jason hadn't been arrested. And then the call came. This time the number wasn't unknown. It was Jason. She stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "You ruined everything," he said, voice raw with fury. "No," she replied calmly. "You did." There was silence, then a laugh, thin, desperate. "You think you won?" he sneered. "You don't know how this works." "I know exactly how it works," she said. "I watched you kill my son and walk free." His breathing grew heavy. "You should have taken the money," he said. "My dad would have made you comfortable." She closed her eyes. "I don't want comfort," she said. "I want truth." "You want blood," he snapped. "No," she corrected. "I want you to live with it." Another pause. "You'll never see me again," he said. "I'll disappear." She smiled softly. "You already can't disappear," she said. "You're everywhere now." She hung up. 2 days later, Jason Cole was detained at a private airport in Vancouver, attempting to board a chartered jet under a false name. Extradition proceedings began immediately. Richard Cole released a final statement denying all wrongdoing. Then he was arrested as well. The trial took months. Sarah testified once. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply told the truth. The locker room video was played in court. Jason watched it this time without an audience, without laughter, without protection. The verdict came on a grey morning. Guilty. Not just of obstruction, but of involuntary manslaughter, elevated by evidence of sustained harassment and assault. Jason was sentenced to 22 years. Richard Cole received 15 for financial crimes and conspiracy. When it was over, reporters tried to speak to Sarah. She said nothing. She walked out of the courthouse alone, the noise fading behind her. That night, she stood by Lake Michigan, the wind cold against her face. She held Ethan's hoodie close and looked out at the dark water. "I didn't save you," she whispered, "but I didn't let them erase you." The city lights reflected on the surface, fractured but shining. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt the weight inside her ease. Not disappear, but settle. Revenge hadn't brought her son back, but it had given him something powerful, a voice. And somewhere beyond the noise of the world, she hoped Ethan could finally rest. The prison letter arrived without warning, slipped under the door of Sarah's rented apartment like an unwanted confession. The envelope was plain. No return address. Just her name, written carefully, deliberately. She knew who it was from before opening it. She sat at the small kitchen table for nearly an hour, staring at it, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. Outside, traffic moved on, indifferent. Life did what it always did, kept going. Finally, she opened it. The handwriting was neat, too neat. "You think you won, but I wake up every day and remember your face. You're the reason I'm here. I hope you know that." She didn't finish reading the rest. She didn't need to. Sarah folded the letter slowly, placed it back in the envelope, and dropped it into the trash. Then she took the trash out immediately, as if distance alone could neutralize it. Jason Cole was alive, and that was his punishment. The trials had ended months ago, but consequences lingered in ways no sentence could capture. Richard Cole's empire collapsed piece by piece. Properties seized, accounts frozen. Former allies turned witnesses overnight. The man who once moved rooms with a smile and a handshake now shuffled through court hallways in silence, his name synonymous with corruption. But Sarah didn't follow the news anymore. She had learned something crucial during the storm. Justice, once achieved, demanded release. Otherwise, it consumed you. She moved again. New city, new apartment, a job at a small community library where no one asked questions and no one recognized her face. The quiet suited her. Books had always felt safer than people. Some days were manageable, others weren't. Grief didn't disappear when revenge ended. It only changed shape. Ethan was everywhere. In the way she caught herself buying his favorite cereal, in the sound of a skateboard rolling past the window, in the laugh of a boy at the library who tilted his head the same way Ethan used to when he was thinking. Some nights she still woke up reaching for a phone that would never buzz again. But she no longer woke up angry. That was the difference. One afternoon, a woman approached her at the library desk. Late 30s, nervous smile. "Are you Sarah Miller?" she asked quietly. Sarah's muscles tensed instantly. "Yes." "I'm sorry," the woman said quickly. "I don't mean to intrude. I read about you. About your son." Sarah considered denying it. Years ago she might have. But something in the woman's eyes stopped her. "My brother," the woman continued, voice trembling. "He went through something similar. The people responsible, nothing ever happened to them. But what you did, it mattered." Sarah swallowed. "I didn't do it alone," she said softly. The woman nodded, still, Thank you. She left before Sarah could respond. That night, Sarah sat on her bed, staring at the wall, the encounter replaying in her mind. For the first time, she understood something she hadn't planned for. Her revenge had become a story. And stories travelled. Weeks later, Tom Harris contacted her again. She almost didn't answer. They're turning the foundation into a case study, he said. Policy reform, oversight, real consequences. That's good, she replied. There's something else, he hesitated. Victims are coming forward, not just from Ethan's school, from other places. Same patterns, same tactics. Sarah closed her eyes. Then it was bigger than I knew. Yes, Tom said, and your name keeps coming up. I don't want fame. I know, he said gently, but people want guidance, not vengeance. Guidance. She didn't answer right away. That night, she dreamed of Ethan standing at the edge of a football field, waving, smiling like he used to when he spotted her in the crowd. She tried to reach him, but the distance never closed. When she woke up, her pillow was wet. 2 months later, Sarah stood in a small community center in a town no one would associate with headlines. Folding chairs, coffee in paper cups. A dozen faces, parents, siblings, survivors. She hadn't planned a speech. She just told the truth. I thought revenge would fix the hole, she said. It didn't, but truth stopped it from growing. People cried, some nodded, some stared at the floor. She didn't offer solutions. She offered honesty. Word spread slowly, not viral, not flashy, real. She began volunteering, quietly, helping families navigate legal systems, connect with journalists, document patterns. She taught them what she'd learned the hard way. Patience, records, silence when necessary, and when to speak. One evening, after a long meeting, she returned home to find a small package at her door. No note. Inside was a simple wooden bracelet, engraved on the inside, for Ethan. She held it in her palm for a long time. Jason wrote again, months later. This time the prison stamped his name clearly. She never opened it. Some things didn't deserve acknowledgement. Years passed. Jason aged quickly inside concrete walls. Appeals failed. His name faded from public discourse, preserved only in case law and cautionary tales. Richard Cole died of a stroke before completing his sentence. His funeral was small, private. No one mentioned Ethan there, but they didn't need to. Sarah visited Ethan's grave on the anniversary every year. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she didn't. She brought books now instead of flowers, leaving them for other visitors to take. She imagined Ethan would like that. On one such visit, a teenage boy stood nearby, reading a plaque, his mother waiting a few steps back. The boy looked up at Sarah. "Did you know him?" he asked. She smiled gently. "Yes." "He seems brave," the boy said. She nodded. "He was kind." The boy thought about that, then nodded back, as if filing the distinctions somewhere important. As they walked away, Sarah felt something warm settle in her chest. Not peace, but purpose. Revenge had been the fire. But this was the light left behind. And for the first time since that burnt coffee morning years ago, Sarah Miller felt that her life was no longer defined by what had been taken from her, but by what she refused to let be taken again.